All right. I want to start out with a little bit of a story arc, like on a high level of kind of where you first got started in your career, the first major business you had, and then the kind of like the scale up, kind of like the 10,000 foot view of just kind of what that story looks like. I think that people will find it really interesting.
Sounds good. Sure. You guys hear me okay? How's everyone doing today?
All right.
So I would say, like, going back to my career wise, I started out, my very first job was actually teaching martial arts when I was about 15 and a half, 16. To this day, it's still my leading passion and my favorite business actually that I own. So I started out in martial arts. I was competing as a competitor. I was captain of the national team. Loved it, but the highest level of sport martial arts competition paid like nothing. When I say nothing, if I traveled the country and won everything at a competition, I might make $500. So it was like nothing. I was 22, turning 23. It was time to land into a real career. And so I moved to Massachusetts. The job market was just much better there. And I just started interviewing like crazy. And I consider myself a PhD, which I define as poor, hungry, and driven, not the college PhD, because I actually don't have a college degree. I learned that PhD from just being very focused and tenacious. I learned a lot of that from martial arts, being disciplined, focused, and tenacity, which I find is, one of the most basic things in anything entrepreneurial or any bold, ambitious goal. I just think it's an absolute tenacity. But after I started interviewing, I landed in the financial services industry as a wealth advisor. To this day, I kind of wonder why they hired me, because I had very limited finance background. I was teaching martial arts, and they kind of looked at my resume and they just said, it doesn't really fit what we typically would go after, but, we recently hired an NFL player who did well because of his sports background and his unique focus. We're gonna give you a shot. And again, I think back to my suit and my first tie. I was literally wearing like a kitty tie with a suit. It's embarrassing to think back. So I wonder why the heck they actually hired me, but they did. So that was my kind of the start of my career as a financial advisor.
Okay. So how did you financial advise to get into the whole industry, which was another big jump, where people might wonder how you did that. And then how did that turn into scaling something to have a nine-figure exit that a lot of people here in the room would love to do one day?
Yeah. So I kind of, after a while, got a little bored of the finance industry. I'm really not a true finance guy at heart, but I had a successful career at it. I started out at Ameriprise. I was one of, if not just to reach their top 1% category of 10,000 advisors. They called it CAT. And I was kind of ready for what's next. And I started deploying capital in the businesses, and I would mentor the entrepreneur at an hour to 2 hour a week. And, although I had not built a ton of businesses, I built a highly successful practice, wealth management practice. So there's a lot of similarities. And so I would mentor these entrepreneurs. I'd provide all the startup capital. And then I kind of loved it. I was getting this passive income, and I loved the leverage of being an entrepreneur, spending a little bit of time weekly, yet I was generating this revenue. And then I started realizing, geez, there's the cash flow, but then I can sell these businesses and I keep doing that. So I just kind of kept launching businesses. I was doing it in the fitness sector. I was active in martial arts. I got into CrossFit gyms because I found out I could have my mixed martial arts program kind of in the back while I was active in CrossFit gyms. So I got active in different businesses. And around 2016, I had my partner running the CrossFit gym, the martial arts gym was being run with my other partners, and my wealth management business was being run. I'm really big on leadership, specifically what I call level 5 leadership. And if you do that well, you can pull yourself out of the machine. And, I started studying billionaires in 2016. And then I really started to understand leverage at a much deeper level. And, again, I say PhD, I think you can reverse engineer learning. I read, probably 8 books from various billionaires. I just absorbed any content I could find on the internet, YouTube, etc. And by the end of that year, my thought was, this isn't rocket science. Like, this is something that you can replicate. So I said, well, I've got some capital. I had an exit not too long ago. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to find the most explosive, fastest growing industry out there. I want to apply my learnings from the billionaires, which I think it's genius that you did billionaires.com. And so by the end of that year, I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. This was 2016. And cannabis looked different at that point in time. I was like one of the early OGs, so to speak, in cannabis on the East Coast. In fact, I built the East Coast's 26th dispensary, legal adult use dispensary that had ever been opened. And I just kind of kept going. We kept opening more dispensaries. And I was applying my learnings from the billionaires. I became vertically integrated. And I said, geez, what they do is they're on retail, extraction, manufacturing, real estate. You're making money all along the vertical that minimizes your downside risk and drastically improves your upside. So I started doing that. I was fortunate. I lived in Massachusetts, which was the very first fully legal cannabis market on the entire East Coast. So I was a little skeptical before I jumped in. I'd studied the industry, studied billionaires, but December of that year, I saw cannabis work as an amazing medicine for my mother, who suffers from pretty extreme PTSD. And in one of her worst episodes, I just saw it be a miracle drug for her. And I always would mentor my entrepreneurs, if you can mix entrepreneurism with passion. So I see how success goes way up, because you gotta understand 90% of people will fail in business or in entrepreneurism somewhere between their 5th and 10th year, if not in their first year. And so you want to have passion connected to whatever it is you're doing. It was right at that moment I knew cannabis was misunderstood from a societal perspective, had lots of value in terms of medicinal value. And when I studied and analyzed the downside risks of cannabis, having come from Asian culture, I'm half Korean, half Australian. I had never even tried cannabis until my 30s. In fact, funny story. In my late teens, my dad, the DEA and anti-drug task force, and used to do cannabis raids at cannabis cultivations. Now here I am, 40 years later in the industry, like the kingpin on the East Coast. It's kind of funny. But look, the moment I saw this be a miracle drug for my mom, I was like, holy smokes, this industry is so misunderstood. 90,000 people will die from alcohol annually, and it's totally socially acceptable. Nobody dies from cannabis. More people will die from Tylenol this year and caffeine. So I was like, whoa, this is like, something's wrong. And I was like, this is an investment opportunity. I was like, this is an entrepreneurial opportunity right in my backyard. So I started studying it. I started getting excited. And when the passion was there, 2-3 weeks later, it was like the first week of January, I went to my wealth management partners and said, you guys have fun running this for a year? They're like, yep. I said, you want to do it again? How about you just keep running this? I said, I'm going to go and build a cannabis business. And one of my partners came in with me on it, and I focused on cannabis. He ran the wealth management business, and then began the most intense entrepreneurial journey I ever embarked on. Way bigger than I originally thought I was chewing into.
Because some people might hear you come from wealth management, so probably you had all the capital you needed, and that's how you built a big platform and exited. Can you talk about your capital raising, investor relations journey as you kind of went through that phase, and then we'll talk about how society views cannabis after that.
Yeah, a lot of people assumed that I got my capital from my wealth management practice. So capital came from my wealth management practice, actually. Because that's federally regulated, you couldn't touch any of those investments for cannabis. And I wasn't going to jeopardize that business because I had 2 other partners that relied on that income. Their families did. So we basically created this wall between the practice and what I was doing and segmented the two. I had to actually go out there and learn how to raise private capital for the first time in my life. And I was way overconfident, borderline arrogant in terms of what I thought I was going to be able to do. I had this attitude like, I'm just going to go out there, talk to a bunch of people, raise $5-10 million and just capitalize this whole thing, right? And I led with my own personal investment dollars, $500,000. So my dollars were the first $500,000 in. I kind of went at the industry Shark Tank style. It took me 6 to 9 months to find my partners. They had an idea, but they had nothing else. So I co-founded the company with them, put the money in, and I thought I was going to raise all the. So I was like, I've got the successful wealth management career. I'm going to raise this capital. So like 12 weeks goes by and my 500K is the only money. And I'm like, what did I just sign up for? I'm like, I'm getting declined like crazy. I'm trying to raise money at a $52 million valuation. And people are like looking at me cross-eyed, like, what are you talking about? This is an idea. You have nothing more than a pitch deck. And they're like, you're raising money at a 52. I just got slaughtered out. Right. So I 17, late summer, the stress started building. I'm like 4 months in now, my capital's the only capital in. I'm like, oh my gosh. Now, if you know my wife is like, I'm the risk taker. She's like on the other end of the spectrum. I'm like, oh, great. What did I sign up for? And then it was around Q4 that year, I reached out to Family Office Club. In fact, it was Andres was the first person I talked to.
Nice.
And, I went through the website, I got some references on it. I was like, okay, I need to learn how to raise capital. I got to sign up for this. And I'm talking to Andres. I'm like, hey, I'll sign up, but I keep trying to get in touch with this Richard guy, but he's like hard to get in touch with. I'm like, look, I'm interested in sign up, but I need at least one conversation with Richard. I was like, I just have a handful of questions for him. I need one conversation with him. So he's like, you know what? Because everybody else on the team was like, nope, Richard doesn't take calls like this. He's a really busy guy. And Andres worked with me. I was like, can I get 1 30-minute conversation? So he got me in front of Richard. I was really impressed with him. He gave me a bunch of pointers. Honestly, right then and there, the reason why I wanted Richard is I had like 6 hot questions on what I needed to do and how I needed to change my raise approach. And I needed those things answered so I can go out there and start raising money because the stress started building. I'm like, what did I just sink $500,000 into? Anyways, the rest of the story is I immediately signed up for Family Office Club after speaking to Richard. I learned how to raise capital. In fact, I learned 2 things from Family Office Club. And Family Office Club is still my favorite family office series by far. I was just at Opal earlier this week. And, the culture here is more entrepreneurial. And I'm very much an entrepreneur through and through. So I just love that. But I signed up for Family Office Club and I learned 2 things. I learned how to raise private investment capital, completely very different skill set than being a wealth advisor. And number 2, I also really learned, wealth advisors think they know how to vet public and private investments. Wealth advisors know nothing about truly vetting private investments. I actually learned that through trial and error and mostly through Family Office Club. And I've now made quite a few private investments. And I really utilize the things that I've learned right here at this conference.
Awesome. Yeah, when running this investor club, I see so many people place a massive emphasis on investor relationships, like how many contacts they can get in front of. When listening to you, it's like the mental model is what you learn from wealth management, you applied to business, and then you learn stuff here about working with investors and you applied it to your cannabis platform, and your martial arts background taught you discipline and focus and tenacity. So much of it is about mental models, like strategies you picked up, and then your mental state and being able to control and focus your energy. It's so much of the game, it seems, but people new to the investor club are always 98% focused on get me in front of an investor.
Yeah.
And we do that too, but it's interesting just to see that and hear your story, the way you describe it.
Yeah, execution is key in all areas of life, and execution in business, it's hard. I don't care if we're talking 500 employee business or 5, execution is not hard. Execution is hard. I will tell you, people a lot of times think it's a matter of just getting the formula, getting the answers to something. That's only half the battle. The other half the battle is you have to execute and apply it, right? I had to take all these techniques from Richard. I had to figure out how to do the Zooms. I had to turn it into a numbers game. I had to learn how to vet the phony investors from the real investors. It was a process. And I took tons of pitches. Again, I came into this industry Shark Tank style. Then I partnered with one of the sharks, Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, who I met through Family Office Club. It was Richard and his team that played a great role in helping make that introduction. But yeah, it was a really wild journey. And Kevin was an early investor. And look, I'll speak to the benefits of pitching with reputable brands, right? When you're building something from nothing, the skepticism is always going to be, well, why do we have to believe, or why should we believe that you're going to build this? And what I'll tell you is cannabis is an extremely difficult industry to raise capital. Arguably one of the most difficult, right? You have so many things you're dealing. You got the fact that, it's federally illegal. A lot of banks don't deal with it. There's tons of stigma associated with it. So it was a difficult thing. I'm proud to say, in large part because of this community, I think I'm about 56 million now, approaching 60 million in private capital raised alongside my money.
Wow. And how long did it take to raise the first 5 million, the first 10 million? What would you say that timeline looks like?
So I'm going to go through the timeline. Probably Q4 of 17, I hired Family Office Club. I started hitting my stride right around that time. I'm telling you that first call I did with you, Richard, you got me the down and dirty, the core things I needed. I started actually getting traction right from that call. Then I started learning a lot more from the Family Office Club conference. I would say, I started getting like the base hits, the first 4 or 5 investors, like 100, 200K investors. Then I started getting bigger investors, $500,000. Then there was a game changer. There were these brothers that had an exit that I got referred to. And referrals, it's all about referrals. Those were the highest quality conversion leads you can get. There was 3 brothers that had a really nice exit, and they wrote $3.5 or $4 million check. And now all of a sudden, when you get the bigger investors, your credibility goes up. You're getting bigger checks. And we just kept going. We had enough now to fund 1 dispensary, 2 dispensaries. Then we got into cultivation, extraction, manufacturing. We were fully vertical. And because I was able to raise the money so quickly, that's how this was able to be an idea in 2017 to a $104 million exit 3.5 years later. It would not have happened had I not been able to get this capital quickly enough. And then number 2, tons of credit to the operating team for executing with excellence. You need both. You have to have the capital. You've also got to be able to execute. And then there's a lot to actually exiting properly as well. But it was a wild journey.
That's one of the reasons that I enjoy running the investor club most. It's like, how many of us would like to have a cup of coffee with someone who in 3.5 years built and sold a company for $100 million, right? Like, you can't have enough of those coffee conversations if you're in business, and Michael's of that same mindset. That's why I love doing these types of interviews. If you know someone else that is as successful as Michael and you think we should be doing some sort of fireside chat with, definitely let me know. I want to ask you about deal origination. I know for people looking for investors, when they see a slide on how to increase their deal origination and get more deal flow, and then even when investors see that, they might not realize how, because everybody, I've got all the deal flow I need. What I need is investors. If I had all the investors I need, I'd do $1 billion a month in deals. And that's true with anyone who can go to LoopNet or, source deals from a business broker. But can you comment real quick just on the importance of seeing lots of deals to find the good ones and how that's connected to raising capital faster?
Absolutely. So if you don't have good deal flow, your likelihood of landing capital into something worthwhile is significantly diminished, right? So I can't tell you in my first 3 years of cannabis how many pitches I sat and I listened through. It was a lot. That was one of my strategic rationales for doing the deal with Kevin. Look, when you're going to partner with one of the sharks, you're going to give up some equity. And it's just like in the TV show, they're ruthless in their deal negotiations between them, their attorneys, and their team. And it was like a 3-4 month negotiation. And I got the deal done on much fairer terms than what they originally wanted. But I was willing to give up some equity because I knew it was going to bring credibility to a company in an industry that honestly lacked a lot of credibility. A lot of people, it's different now than it is in 2017. Now, over 90% of people in this country believe medical cannabis should be legal. Back then, it was lower, and it was also less than 50% of society believed adult use cannabis should be legal. Now, the majority of society believes adult use cannabis should be legal. So that credibility and aligning myself with Kevin, it gave me credibility. But number 2, I intentionally wanted to be looked at like a mini shark in the cannabis. I got a ton of deal flow. Now, I'll give you an example of some of the deal flow I've gotten. I actually don't even want to spend as much time as I'm spending in the cannabis world, but it kind of keeps pulling me back in because of the success. I'll give you some examples. When you create that deal flow become a deal flow magnet. Where what will happen? So one of my deals, when I was building Nature's Remedy, which is the company that I exited for 104 million, we built a dispensary, we put $1 million into it. We sold it for 13.5 million to one of the big players. So 13.5x multiple pretty quickly. Then that basically lost its opportunity to do business in Massachusetts. We're at the opportunity to buy it back for $1 million, right? And now that dispensary, the market's not as high as it was back then, but we're going to open that dispensary this year. It'll probably be worth 5 to 8 million within a year and a half. And once the market comes back up, for many of you that don't know, the DEA recently slated they're changing the scheduling of cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. That's a big deal. Right now, Schedule 1 says cannabis is as harmful to society as heroin and has zero medicinal benefits. Where 3 says it's nowhere near as harmful and there's lots of medical benefits.
Do you think that's going to change everything, by the way? I was going to...
It's why I'm betting. It's part of the reason why I'm kind of spending a little more time in cannabis. Cannabis, when I got into it, was emerging on the East Coast rapidly. Were public markets still. Canada was this close to being the first legal country in cannabis. But guess what happened? The Canadian Stock Exchange became the world's first exchange to bank cannabis. So here's what happened. And this is why I'm betting on it's going to happen again. This is why I'm putting my time and my energy a little more in cannabis than I even want to. The reason why I was able to sell, part of it is timing. Where the Canadian Stock Exchange had just had billions of dollars come through. For the first time, the world was excited about investing in legal cannabis businesses. What happened is I saw that money come into Massachusetts, and I saw some of my peers going into bankruptcy, having their businesses bought out for $8 million for failure, right? So some of this is about timing. And so what happened in the cannabis industry, if you look at it on the macro, it got really hot, public markets, there was more money chasing, lots of money was chasing lots of bad deals because there were not enough seasoned cannabis businesses that were well run yet. In fact, when I look back on those businesses at times, you can look at the stock. A lot of the stock fell apart because these businesses were poorly run. So the public markets went down. The last couple of years have not been hot for cannabis. But what just happened 6 weeks ago, the DEA schedule change, I promise you, this industry is about to pop. It is estimated 15 trillion with a T dollars are going to come into this industry once the major U.S. exchanges allow it to come in. Right now, you still cannot go to E-Trade. You can't go to Fidelity, Merrill, UBS. You can't buy plant-touching cannabis stocks in this country still. But what that's all about to change, the DEA changing the schedule change, is the first domino to fall. I see that happening. Some people in the industry think it's going to happen Q4 this year. I think it'll take longer, but that's happening. Safe banking will happen. And then the major exchanges, will allow cannabis to come through. What's that going to do? Even if it's not 15 trillion and it's 5 trillion. For someone like me that's got cannabis businesses out there and I can keep sourcing cannabis deals, I mean, that's a huge opportunity for another exit. And I've now built another cannabis company that this year should do 15, 16 million. Next year should do 30 million. And I'm hopeful to exit it again for 150 to 250 is the goal.
Sure. If you were starting everything over today or talking to someone here that wants to grow to that size, what would you do differently? I mean, 3.5 years to scale to 100 million. I mean, that's pretty dang fast, but like, what would you do to grow even faster or grow even larger, be more effective? What insight have you learned?
A lot. So number one, I would have been even more skeptical on the industry because there were just some people that we placed trust and time and energy and capital with that were not trustworthy. So do even deeper vetting. Now, to this point now, I literally have a PI firm that will hire in some cases really deep vetting. So I'm far more skeptical. I just kind of look at anybody that comes to me that pitches me is probably talking BS first. And I kind of go into it that, and I try to seek to find, okay, is this a real deal? I'm far more skeptical than I ever used to. Number one, I really appreciate more how executives of a company may not be willing to change as quickly as the company needs. When you go from an idea Number one, all of a sudden cash flowing to 15 million to 30 million to a $100 million exit. The company looks and feels so different at these different stages in 3.5 years. So what you have to be prepared to do is lead that executive team in a way that you change the people or change the people. And that might sound harsh, but what I mean by that is good leadership and direction from the board on how to grow into the opportunity. Or it's nothing personal. It's time for you to step aside because this is what's needed to build this from a pre-revenue startup to a 9-figure company. And some of those changes, had I looked back, just didn't happen quick enough. And I actually think that if we'd handled some of these things differently from a board level, we probably would have gotten an extra 50 to 100 million.
What's a $1 million insight?
$1 million insight. So just like a big insight?
Yeah, like one of the most valuable insights you can think.
So I'll give one on both sides. An investor, and you're looking to invest in the right team, vet for emotional intelligence. I find it one of the most important things to vet for. Lots of people vet for different things. In order to believe what that person is telling you, they've got to actually have the raw tenacity, grit, focus, indomitable spirit to actually build it. They don't have a deep level of emotional intelligence. They just won't get there. I think of myself as a relatively emotional intelligent person, still have plenty of room to grow, but I've got a track record of success that's pretty consistent and compelling in all areas of my life because of emotional intelligence. So when I vet this person, I basically draw a line and I go back to their career and I say to them, walk me through your outlier accomplishments in your lifetime, whether it be educational, work-related, sports, whatever it is. And I'll go all the way back to like when they're 20, believe it or not. Kind of a lengthy question because they have to kind of keep answering every chapter of their life, but I've gotten pretty good at it. I can tell if someone's kind of like tap dancing and making up accolades. By the way, I write it all out. Then you can go back and vet for it too. Too much of it seems like embellishment, then I'm not going to be too, but if it seems like right on point, and I love the people that are actually like more humble and they actually undersold themselves, but then there's a consistent track record. So vet for, if you're on the investment side, vet for emotional intelligence, and be very cautious about, can you trust this person? You have to remember, I've been on both sides. I'm an investor and a founder. Let me just tell you, there've been plenty of times where I'm a founder. If I don't raise this next $500,000, this company goes under. And you have to hope that the person talking to you actually has integrity. Because if they don't, they're just getting your money just because they need your money. So that's a real important factor. On the other side of it, so that's on the investment side. If you're trying to raise capital, I guess my advice would be execute on what you're learning at conferences like this. And just know that if you're trying to raise capital, it really is a numbers game and you have to execute on the numbers. What we knew is, like in our early days, we knew, hey, we needed 20 referrals or leads, 20 people to talk to, with about 5 on an investor presentation. And we knew about half of them would go into deep due diligence. And we knew a certain percentage of that last group would actually invest. We had it down to a science. So we basically knew our numbers and executed on those numbers. It's the same thing I do in my martial arts business. You know, we spend X amount in marketing, you know, how many leads we're going to get. We know how many members we're going to get from that.
Awesome. Yeah, knowing your numbers. The book called Shut Up and Listen by Tillman Fertitta. He owns the Houston Rockets, Rainforest Cafe, and 600 restaurants. He talks about that quite a bit inside of his book, if anyone wants to pick up a good billionaire book. My last question, and then we can cover any last topics you wanted to make sure and get across about the cannabis industry or otherwise, is what's kind of like a counterintuitive lesson that's not obvious until just recently to you? Like after 10,000 hours, you're just like, oh, I can't believe that's what I should have been doing.
Yeah, I struggle with this. I still haven't mastered it. It's the PhD in me.
Yeah.
The concept of less is more. There becomes a certain point in your career where it's actually not about working hard anymore. In fact, working too hard becomes a detriment. Like when I say PhD, in my early 20s, I worked 70, 80-hour weeks. My early days of the cannabis industry, when I started talking about 2017, I was back to working 70-hour weeks. If I could do it over again, I'd have worked 35 to 40, been far more strategic, and I would have focused on excellent decision-making. When you think about and study the Buffetts of the world, you know how many hours Buffett spent reading during the day? It was the vast majority of his workday. He was just reading. Guess what that did for him? He got knowledge in order to make better strategic decisions. Where it's a point in time in your career where it's less about hard work, where it's even less of the money. In fact, a lot about the downsides of a big exit. Everybody thinks it's all positive. There's a ton of negatives. The most depressing year of my life was the year after my exit, believe it or not. But I would say less is more, right? I still work too hard, Richard, and I try not to, but it's like ingrained in me. It's the old school Korean work ethic, I guess. Less is more. Working smarter versus harder. My biggest breakthroughs in my life is when I said, okay, hold on, let me take a step back. Let me work smarter versus harder. Like in the story, I took a year off. I took a sabbatical where it was very hard for me to do that. But what I did was I studied billionaires and I studied what's the most explosive industry, and I prepared my entry point into this industry. Had I not taken that time, I don't think I would have had that exit in 3.5 years.
Awesome. Michael and I had shared a text message or two before he got up here. But I didn't know he was going to say that. It so aligns with like what we teach at Investor Club, being a perpetual learning machine. Your comments on emotional intelligence. My experience is that the wealthiest families I know, instantly, within less than 1 second, they're trying to get subconsciously, I think they're getting this feel of like, do I like this person? Can I trust them? Is what they're doing unique? Do they have momentum? Are they real? Like instantly, they're trying to judge that just to see if they should waste their time or not.
Yep.
And they might politely listen a little bit and excuse themselves, but it's almost instant. You're going to put in someone, as harsh as that may sound, but if it's not clear what you do, then almost none of it matters. So you're like, I have no idea what he was trying to pitch me. Or that sounds like everyone else in that niche. And so when I was listening about emotional intelligence, that's just what I was thinking through. And I love that you said you took time to be strategic and found an explosive industry, because it shows it's not an accident. I talked to someone last week and they said, oh, you're reading all the books from billionaires. Well, didn't they all just inherit the money and just get lucky? And I was like, no, if you read the books, that's not. A lot of them are like you, right? It's not like you were born, worth $10 million and had a trust fund to launch stuff. So any final comments, anything you wanted to get across for today that you want to make sure and communicate to the audience on cannabis, on what you're doing next, on how to work with you, anything like that?
I mean, are we doing a Q&A? Because I was going to say whatever questions.
Yeah, we can grab a quick question or two.
Whatever the audience might have, I'm happy to address. I'm pretty radically transparent and can.
We have one or two in the back.
Looks like Rob's got a question.
Thanks, Michael, for sharing today. Just from cannabis and an investing component, does that cause like banking issues because you're involved?
Cause a banking issue? So it can, right? So I would say I'll answer it like this. The misnomer in cannabis, especially with East Coast cannabis, is that we don't have banking. I never operated a day in my life in the cannabis sector without full banking and like multiple backup banks. Where it is dicey is, look, you are still doing something federally illegal. So what happens is some banks might decide to get into the game. There's lots of banks that say, wow, we're going to tiptoe into cannabis because, there's so much more profits there. But then they find out, oh, it's a lot of work and there's compliance and we got to deal with this risk. And so they'll come out. So there have been times that I've opened a bank account, they're cannabis friendly, and then they say, okay, we're not in it. So I got to kind of deal with that. But outside of that, no, it's actually impacted me zero. I still have my investment accounts, my banking accounts. Look, the feds will not, and this is why I'm so focused on being compliant in the cannabis industry. The feds aren't going to touch you if you're following state laws. But if you're doing illegal stuff, you're breaking regulations, you become a target, So that's been my experience with banking. Thank you.
Why was the first year after the exit so tough for you? It seems like, you would enjoy that. You would have prepped for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it was a little unique for me. Well, I don't know. Actually, I talked to a lot of people that have exits and have had the exact same experience as me. So I'd say it like this. Number one, you go through a bit of like this identity crisis, right? All of a sudden, the world just starts looking at you differently and becomes uncomfortable. Like, and there's, and you know, and so like for me, like my identity was PhD. I come from nothing. Look, there were times where we were on food, the family. And so, look, that's more of an identity of, hey, I'm growing, I'm building, I'm driving. Then all of a sudden the world looks at you like you've made it. And then you start thinking, well, wait a minute. Do people think I'm like a trust fund baby? Like how am I looked at? You know what I mean? And so you go through this identity crisis. Look, you'd think it'd be all positive, but it's not all positive, right? Your spouse starts thinking, every time you travel, 15 women are trying to get you because you've had this exit. You know what I mean? And it's, so it creates all these extra complexities. People come out of the woodwork. They want your money. You know what I mean? There's tons of fake relationships. I can't stand fake relationships. Like Opal was fun, but there's also a lot of pompous fake people that are there. You know what I mean? So those aspects were very, very challenging for me. And then there was this sense internally, like, wait a minute, now you have all this money. And it for a minute throughout that 12 months after, it disrupted my drive. Because now all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I can't just be building businesses. I now need to focus on managing this money. I now need to focus on, doing some things with my family because I've been working a lot. It just created all this complexity all of a sudden that became like a part-time job. And nobody really talks about that stuff. I will tell you, the high percentage of founders that have exits, I've had the exact same experience, actually. And some of them dealt with some serious depression post the exit, because all of a sudden it's like for some, you take away their favorite thing, which is building, because all of a sudden they don't need to build it. You know what I mean? So it becomes this weird emotional journey.
Appreciate you sharing. I think we have one last question in front, Jennifer, and then also Alina in the middle in the pink shirt, and then we'll probably wrap it up. I've just got one last section of my slides, and we'll be wrapped up for the day for networking. I think in the black shirt. Yeah.
How do you see the retail cannabis market changing over the next few years, not only with the schedule, but also with all the cannabis-derived pharmaceuticals coming out?
Yeah, I think there's going to be lots of changes. There's so many different aspects to that. So if you're talking the East Coast is just starting to really get, every state now on the East Coast is legal for cannabis, except for the Carolinas, and they have pending legislation. So I think the East Coast is going to experience cannabis for the first time legally. I do think the feds are going to come into this. I do think there'll be pharmaceutical products. I don't think interstate commerce. Right now, everything is a state-by-state ecosystem, which is actually a huge benefit for me as an entrepreneur, right? Because it's like I got all these states playing out, and it's like the same rules of monopoly I can apply in those states. I think consumers are going to look at cannabis retail purchasing different over the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, it is my belief, a bold belief, but I do think it's going to happen. I believe we'll be buying cannabis-infused drinks at our restaurants, grocery stores, bars, no different than alcohol. I'm pretty confident. The fastest growing product segment in cannabis right now is cannabis drinks. Guess why? Society has already said this is the destigmatized way we consume our drugs. Alcohol and caffeine are drugs. Nobody thinks of it like that, but they're drugs. Cannabis drinks is going from 1.5 billion to 20 billion, which is a huge growth trajectory in the next 3.5 years. That's massive growth. That's just cannabis drinks being sold in dispensaries. It's going to be massively bigger once it's outside of. This is why we're investing in cannabis drinks manufacturing in the East Coast right now. We think it's going to be a pretty big.
Alina, last question, and then we'll wrap up.
We heard from John today how critical it is for his line of business, which is real estate, to have exit in mind. When you were building cannabis business, did you have exit in mind, and what did it look like?
When I was building the cannabis business today, I have, did you say an asset in mind? Oh, an exit, yes. I actually did. A lot of people get into cannabis, get into exit. That was my plan originally. I originally did not plan to build 2 cannabis companies. I sometimes wonder if I should have done that as quick, because what I did is it took about 9 months for me to sell Nature's Remedy. I immediately started building Cannapreneur partners at the beginning of the sale of that exit. Time having another company, because I felt like I was in the 4th inning in Massachusetts. I got in the so I did go in with a specific design to exit. With my company now, the attitude's a little different. The environment's a little different. What I say to the team and the board all the time is, we're just building an amazing company that will stand the test of time. And as the markets heat up again for acquisitions, M&A, which will absolutely come in my opinion, we'll absolutely entertain those exits once again.
Are we going to see you one day on billionaires.com, you think?
I don't think so, Richard. I'll tell you, I do have a goal to never be a billionaire. Believe it or not, earlier in my years, I actually wanted to be a billionaire, like the entrepreneur in me. But my belief is, at some point, enough money is enough money. So my plan would be hit a certain net worth, and then I just want to give everything away. Do I want to generate wealth the way billionaires do? I do, but I want to give back to society. I actually, one of the things I didn't like about studying the billionaires is they're, how would I put it? They're not focused on, given the amount of power that they have generated. And I look at money as energy. But my belief, have billions upon billions of dollars. That's a lot of energy and a lot of responsibility to do something with that energy. And here's what I sadly found what a lot of the billionaires are doing with this energy. Most of them are just competing with each other. Not all. There's some great billionaires out there. But look, think about it. Like, why did not more billionaires run for president, right? They're busy doing whatever the hell they want to do when they want to do it. Why would they want to deal with a bunch of crap, right?
One thing I appreciate about Arnold's documentary is like he appreciated the chance to come to America so much that when he got elected as governor, he met with both sides, said, I want to hear everything from both sides. We're going to work together and serve California.
Yeah.
And you could say that he's not honest in saying that or not genuine. I think he's genuine personally. But you're saying there should be more people like that. Like Arnold's created billions in value.
Yes.
Currently said to be a billionaire. Who knows?
Right.
Like you're saying someone like that who's like, serving and adding value while they...
Yes. Yeah, I want to create billions and billions of dollars of value to society. But it's like, how much money do me and my family really need is kind of how I think of it. So I kind of have a net worth goal in mind. And after that, I just want to give it away efficiently. But when I say efficiently, not to a bunch of nonprofits, because as was talked about here, nonprofits don't solve a lot, but continue to put that back in the businesses that actually do solve problems the way Elon Musk does.
Right. I think that 20 or 30% more billionaires would be viewed more positively if every journalist didn't think they were the devil. Because
right.
when I meet them, they're often so passionate about what they do, just like John was. They are employing people.
Yes.
They're protecting their investors who work their whole life to get that passive income to retire. They are investing in their local society. And it's just not the press they get. It's not what makes the headlines.
Right.
But I get what you're saying. I'm glad that you gave me such a smart answer instead of just maybe and then everyone claps. It's just good to hear that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
Michael, big round of applause. Thank you.
Join the Family Office Club by visiting familyoffices.com. We look forward to seeing you at our next live event.